I might start carrying this as my lazy portrait lens. Portraits are almost too easy with this lens. 4 times cheaper than my favourite Voigtlander Nocturne 75mm, this lens is now the best budget portrait lens for Leica LMount. Coming up, I'm going to show it compared to 4 other similar lenses. The Voigtlander, £849. Typox Samara, also £849. You got the Lumix 85mm for £550. And finally the TTArtisan's cheaper, £279, but not as cheap as this lens, £199. Coming up, everything you need to know about the TTArtisan 75mm f2 lens, now available in Leica LMount. This lens was already available in Sony E-mount and Nikon Z-mount. Join me as we head to the Czech Republic, where I use this lens for my entire photo shoot trip, 6 models in total. And then stay with me until the end and I'll give my verdict. How does this lens compare to the Voigtlander Nocturne 75 1.5, the Lumix 85 1.8 and the sister lens, the TTArtisan 75 1.5 Biotar clone. Welcome, Matt here. I teach model photography and portrait lighting, and I specialise in Leica cameras in particular. First, join me in the Czech Republic, where I show real-world use of the 75 f2 TTArtisan lens on my Leica SL2S. This lens is pretty much glued to my camera for the full trip, which is unusual because I normally swap lenses every 5 minutes. Just as a warning, most of the photos you're going to see are me using a mist filter on this lens because that's how I use it for my portraits. Feel free to skip ahead to the side-by-side test photos, but first let's look at some model photography. So for those of you interested in model photography, that's basically what I do when I'm not making YouTube videos. To learn more about how I organise photo shoots in the Czech Republic, check out my Patreon, where I'll go through in much more detail everything you need to know about this trip and lots more behind the scenes. So let me give you some more details about the camera settings and the setup for these photo shoots and the images you're going to see. All photos shot with the SL2S as mentioned, and the 75 f2, normally at f2 unless I knocked it, and then it may have been at 2.2, 2.4, something like that. All the photos you're seeing are available light only. Made it easy, and I just used like white reflectors to kind of bounce up some fill light if I needed that for the photos. Almost all the images I'm showing I shot with a mist filter. I took it off on a few occasions, basically just so the person using the behind the scenes camera could show the front of the lens, and it was actually the TTArtisan lens, otherwise you couldn't really see what it was. I was shooting raw as I normally do, and then I just added my black and white mist like a preset in Lightroom. I will do presets for the SL2S. I'm still working on them behind the scenes, so I can put a link below to my newsletter. Sign up to that if you want to know when new presets are getting released. In terms of how I use this lens, I'm quite old-fashioned with how I shoot. So I always have my digital camera set to single point autofocus on AFS mode, and then I'll put the cross on the nearest eye, pulse my shutter release to make sure it's focused, take my shot. I did find the autofocus great, no issues at all, except in like really bad light when I was shooting like right into the sun. And then it did struggle and kind of hunt a little bit. For my black and white portrait, I have my camera set to black and white JPEG mode, but then RAW only. So my preview is black and white, so then I can visualize in black and white. And then I normally shoot into the sun, and then I backfill, as you can see here, with the reflector to give a bit of fill light. That also puts a bit of sparkle on the eyes. And then that way you have really nice skin, and it means I don't need to edit any photos. And I can send each model their 300 images, just RAW plus preset, and it's way quicker. If you know this channel, I'm normally a 50mm guy, so the 75mm did catch me out a few times. I did have to keep stepping back to get the composition I was looking for. But overall, using a fast 75 or 85mm lens really does feel like cheating, because you just nuke the background into like nice bokeh. Then all you really need to do is focus on your model and the expression, the clothing, things like that. Portraits are almost too easy with this lens. With that said, let's learn a bit more about the lens itself. Okay, so with my real world testing photos done, model photography, what I normally shoot, let me tell you a bit more about this lens and show you it compared to other popular both 75mm lenses and 85mm lenses. The lens is a nice size with a 62mm front filter thread. I use the step ring to do 62 to 67 for my mist filters. This is a focus by wire lens, so you can't see anything, and the lens comes with a lens hood, which is a bit different. It's a square lens hood compared to a more standard round lens hood. You can reverse mount the hood, which is good, like so. But I'll be honest, I didn't use the lens hood at all, so you probably don't need it like on most modern lenses. Most modern lenses have got great multi-coatings, which means you don't really need a lens hood. The lens comes with front and back lens caps. The only perhaps unusual feature, something I've not seen before I don't think, is on the lens cap you have a USB-C port, and the cap has got the electronic contacts. So when they do firmware updates, you put obviously the lens onto the lens cap and then plug it in, and then you can charge it while it's standing like that. So here you can see the size on the little Leica CL if you've got one of these cameras. It gives a really nice tiny kind of short telephoto autofocus setup. Okay, here you can see it on the Leica SL2S as I use it in the Czech Republic. To give you an idea of scale, here it is on my Lumix S9, which is a full frame mirrorless camera, similar to the Lumix S5 IIX, but smaller and no viewfinder. See that video? It's my workhorse for video. So we've got the Voigtlander Nocturne 75 1.5, very popular with like LMount users. Next we've got the reasonably new TTArtisan Chimera 75 1.4. These lenses are both like a LMount rangefinder coupled. The next lenses are all LMount or Leica LMount, and they're all autofocus. What the lens we're looking at today, the TTArtisan 75 f2 autofocus. We've then got the Panasonic Lumix 85 1.8, and again another reasonably new lens, the TTArtisan's 85 1.8. So the TTArtisan sits in the middle between the manual focus like LMount lenses and the autofocus LMount lenses. This actually might be the sweet spot. 85mm can be a little bit too long in some circumstances for me, but I think for the size you get from an f2 lens, this reminds me of the Sigma DG-DN lenses, where you've got a proper clicky aperture, the metal build, but yet at a crazy affordable price. So I think TTArtisan have done a really good job here. They seem to have found like a gap in the market between the standard, more common 85mm autofocus lenses for L-mount, and then obviously the classic 75mm for like a M-mount. I might start carrying this as my lazy portrait lens. Things I like and don't like. One negative is there's no aperture lock, so sometimes I found myself I'd knocked it to f2.5 or 2.8 by mistake, and then it gets even sharper, and it was definitely too sharp for portraits. Anything beyond f2. As I say, I did use a mist filter on the front for most of my pictures because I wanted it a little bit softer with a little bit less contrast. Other negatives, although this is a nice metal built body, I don't feel the anodizing is going to last as long as on maybe more premium lenses. I've only used it for like a week or so on one trip, and the anodizing is already starting to wear off, the black anodizing, so I think it will look quite marked quite quickly on the body if that matters to you, but obviously for the price you expect them to take some shortcuts. And like many autofocus lenses that have a manual focus autofocus lock switch, this lens has no switch. It's got no buttons at all on the lens itself. Personally, I prefer the manual focus autofocus switch so I can quickly turn it on or off without going into the menus. And my last complaint is the photos from this lens are too digital looking. They're more contrasty, very sharp, and different to the vintage lenses that I normally use, which are much more forgiving for female portraits. I was happy with the final images when you look at a distance, but when you zoom in they do look very digital. Now I do have an alternative lens which may be the answer. Now if you're looking for a sharp, modern, well corrected lens, you're going to love the 75 f2, but if you prefer something a bit more arty, you may prefer the 75 1.5, which is as arty as they come. If you're a photographer that likes the film look, that probably means you prefer the imperfections in lenses, which means something like vintage lenses. This lens is based on a vintage biotar, so it really does give you that softness and famous Leica glow wide open, even though it's not a Leica lens. Perfect for female portraits if we zoom in on these Flickr photos. Put a link below to Flickr and the blog and everything else. The 75 f2, as we'll see, is sharp pretty much edge to edge, even from wide open. The 75 1.5 is sharp in the center, but then it falls off really rapidly. So if you've got your eyes like towards the edge of the frame, you're going to miss focus. So that's one drawback with this lens compared to the new 75 f2 optical design. Price wise, still decent, £269 on Amazon. I can put some links below, versus £200 for the modern lens. Okay, now you probably want to see some raw photos, unedited, no presets added. So I'm going to do side-by-side testing as mentioned, comparing the TTArtisan to the Nocturne and to the Lumix lens. Okay, to compare the mentioned lenses, let's look at lens sharpness. So first, taking a photo of my little Leica 1 as my model, and then this is the TTArtisan. As we stop down, you can see both the bokeh and the sharpness. Feel free to pause it at any stage to check the details. And here it is compared to the Voigtlander and the Lumix lens. There's not a huge difference shooting with the light and against the light. Here you can see an infinity test, sharpness top left corner, stopping down, and then against the other two lenses. And again, the difference isn't that great, especially at 5.6. Sun stars. The TTArtisan is rubbish at sun stars. I didn't manage to get any decent sun stars at any f-stop. Lens flare, I was using the lens without the hood, and I tried my best to get it to flare. Had no real issues for real world use, but then I tried to do some video tests like this, and it will actually flare if you try hard enough. But as I say, I didn't get any issues in my portrait sessions that I did in the Czech Republic. You could just use your lens hood if you don't want lens flare. Vignetting. This lens has got a bit of vignetting at f2, but it's probably gone by maybe 5.6. Bokeh, another popular one. This lens has really nice lens bokeh. As you can see, stopping down. For me, I used it wide open as much as I could, and wide open it's got really nice bokeh. Not quite as swirly perhaps as the Voigtlander, but very good, especially for a modern lens. We've got a bit of misshaped kind of oval bokeh at the edges and round bokeh in the center. In terms of the colors, I'd say ask as someone who's not a black and white photographer, but no, I'll show you a few raw photos. So the left is obviously the raw photos, and then on the right I've got preset added, either a color preset as you can see here, or black and white preset as you'll see in a second. The main thing to note is most of these photos have got the mist filter on, so the photos on the left look a bit more opaque because of the lower contrast, because of the mist filter. So you will get much more contrast out of camera if you don't use the mist filter, and so yeah, it behaves like most other modern lenses. What are autofocus speed? So all the talking head shots with the red background in this video are actually shot with a 75 f2, but here's a butterfly I was chasing, and here's me doing some on location eye test. It's not the best lens, a combination of Leica cameras being a bit rubbish for autofocus, for moving stuff like this, and then also the lens, probably more the camera than the lens, but it will work especially on more static subjects as for these talking headshots. So what is the verdict? I think for the money the TTArtisan lens is great. I think if you're shooting in a studio environment, you don't necessarily need to struggle with manual focus, say M lenses. M lenses are of course amazing and I do love them, but if you're shooting against like a black background like we have here, there is no benefit really for shooting M lenses compared to autofocus lenses. Now autofocus lenses are getting as small as M lenses. It really does make it quite convenient and yeah, tempting to get these smaller autofocus lenses and keep my M lenses when I'm shooting, say, outside. That being said, if you're going to stop down as seen in the testing, if you're going to shoot at 5.6, again, you can probably use any lens and it doesn't really matter. The question is, should you go out and buy this lens? I think, to be honest, if you saw my last video about YouTubers are lying to us, I think many YouTubers, including myself, do a great sales pitch on many of our videos saying how great this lens is, but in reality you can probably get very similar photos with many similar lenses. From those test raw photos, it was very difficult to tell the difference between the manual focus Nocturne Voigtlander lens and the autofocus Lumix lens compared to the TTArtisan. So I think as long as you have one short telephoto lens between say 60mm and 100mm, that's probably good enough. If you want something small, this is great. If certain lenses have certain features that you prefer more, maybe skip this lens and get one of the others. And so that comes back to the question at the start of the video, what is better? If you're looking at the 7 Artisans, it's more similar to the Lumix, so check out the Lumix video, so I won't kind of duplicate here. And equally, if you're interested in the TTArtisan lens, check out the TTArtisan video where I compare that to the Nocturne. So we'll stick to these three lenses. I've put the LMount lens on the LMount adapter, so this is how big it will be if you attach it to an LMount camera such as my Leica SL, and the adapters will add a bit of weight, and then it makes the height pretty much the same as well. So after making the whole video, I still wasn't that sure in terms of which is the best performer of these three lenses. So I revisited the photos, zoomed in like 1,000,000%, both corners, center sharpness and bokeh. Sharpest at the edges is the Lumix and also least vignetting. Sharpest in the center is the Lumix, other two are similar. biggest bokeh balls and least vignetting, also the Limix. So in conclusion, yes, the Voigtlander Nocturne is 4 times more expensive than the TTArtisan in this example, but the advantage of this is it's all metal and glass, no electronics, so you can use this on both M cameras, film and digital, as well as LMount using an LMount adapter. The advantage on LMount is you've got with a helicoid from like Lens Lab, you can then close focus closer than with the TTArtisan lens. Build quality and finish is arguably better on the Voigtlander compared to the TTArtisan, but optically the TTArtisan is very similar for corner sharpness, center sharpness and bokeh to the Nocturne. Don't be fooled, shoot the Nocturne wide open and it will compete with the Noctilux. See that video. Finally, if you want the sharpest and you want electronic, I would go for the Limix, sharpest in the center and sharpest in the corner. But the TTArtisan is fantastic value for money, and if you're only going to be using a short telephoto for occasional use, I think this lens really is a no-brainer. Comment below which was your favorite of these 3 lenses, and hope to catch you in the next video.